ladies and gentlemen, independent Americans around the country and around the world. Spring is finally here. Things are looking up in much of the country, but we are still going through some difficult times. And I'm very happy to bring back a returning champion who's helped things get better. We spoke to him almost exactly a year ago this month, and he's been making good shit happen ever since. So I'm very happy, privileged, excited to bring back the great and powerful Jake Wood. How are you, my friend? Welcome back.
Hey, I'm good, man. Too kind in the introduction. It's good to be back on the show, though.
And you have, I think you're the first guest ever to have a backward baseball cap on the show. So I celebrate that. I was going to wear a hat, and then I was like, I don't think I could wear a hat on my show, but I'm glad that you did.
Hey, I dressed for radio today, man.
But you look good for video, because we've got video too. If folks go to independentamericans.us, go to the YouTube page. But welcome back, man. Great to have you here. A lot has happened in the last year in America, in the world, but a lot's happened in your world too. You have a new book, Once a Warrior, is now out. You have a new baby girl, and you have a new national coalition that's been helping a ton of people nationwide. But let me go to the question that I think is always important. Where are you, Jake, and how are you?
Yeah, well, I'm home in Los Angeles. My organization, Team Rubicon, is still working remotely, so I'm dialing in live from my headquarters, which is my garage, and I'm doing good, man. I am energized right now, despite having a 4-month-old at home that got me up at 3:30 this morning, because I think this country is starting to turn a corner. I know that the group I lead is playing a part in that, which is inspiring, and I think that there's a better second half of 2021 that we're barreling towards, and I'm excited to get there, man.
I love that. We talk a lot about the helpers, and I've talked a lot about your leadership, and I've talked about Team Rubicon. We've encouraged folks to volunteer, to join, to be a part of it, and it's a true movement. But nothing is more entrepreneurial than having a family, and especially a family in the pandemic. And you've been really, I think, brave and courageous and open in talking about how difficult the recent birth of your daughter was. Can you, my son ended up in the NICU, my oldest son, I shared with you for the first week or so he was born. And that was some of the scariest, hardest stuff I've ever been through. And I've been to combat. You've been in a ton of difficult situations. As much as you're comfortable, Jake, can you share what that experience was like for you and for your family?
Yeah, so my wife got pregnant last year, early in the pandemic. It was a pandemic baby, probably a bunch of those popping up. And a couple months in, we learned through her OB that the child had a very serious congenital heart defect called transposition of the great artery, which meant that basically all the arteries that went into her heart were reversed. They weren't where they were supposed to be. And it's a totally unsurvivable condition outside of the womb and without intervention. And so one, we felt really lucky that we got this diagnosed and we had the ability to spend the last couple of months of that pregnancy building a plan. And then two, it just really put life in perspective for us because, we have great insurance. We live in Los Angeles with access to literally the best pediatric heart surgeons in the world. And we were able to line up an amazing surgeon and care team. But it was wild. My wife delivered in COVID. I had to go with the baby in an ambulance to a different hospital, like immediately leave my wife alone behind, take that baby. And, the next 3 days were the most terrifying of my life. The baby spent 3 days where they were struggling 24 hours a day to keep her stable. They had to wait 3 days to do the surgery because they had to wait for the lungs to decompress. And I saw these amazing nurses and doctors and technicians just working around the clock to keep her alive. And it was terrifying in a way that, guys like you and me who have been in combat, it's hard to even fathom because it's a totally different enemy. It's a totally different love. And then the moment I had to hand that little girl, her name's Lila, over to a surgeon that Monday, it was a Monday morning, and I knew she was going to be gone for 6 hours, and they were going to rip her chest open, put her on a heart-lung bypass machine, and cut all of her arteries off her heart. I just sat there and I thought to myself, for the first time in my life, I felt like I had no control. But again, like for us, for my wife, for myself, we took it as an opportunity to take stock of our life. And again, we got that whole thing cost $1.5 million, we got a $3,000 bill at the end of the day because we have insurance. There were people on that floor that, couldn't even, they could only come in at night to see their child because they couldn't take the time off work to be there 24 hours a day like we were. They were going to get that big ass bill at the end. And then I think about all the places I've been around the world, all the different countries. And I know that if my daughter had been born in Afghanistan or Iraq, where I spent, part of my adult life, that baby would not have survived. It would have died within 30 minutes of childbirth because of that condition. So it was a wild time, man. But it as with many of the moments I've had in my life, it put things in perspective, and I feel really, really blessed.
I am grateful that you shared it, and I think many folks have been grateful that you've been sharing this journey and your family's journey, because I know I felt more isolated when Ryder was in the NICU than maybe at any other time in my life. And I remember my wife not being able to see him for a couple of days, the fear, the anxiety, but also the inspiration of seeing those people who were on the front lines. I think NICU nurses are the baddest people I've ever seen in my life. They're incredible, right? And you know that. And I now in retrospect, he's 5.5. I think back to how tough that moment was and how maybe it made him stronger and maybe it made us stronger. But I'm glad Lila's great, and you guys have this beautiful family that's inspiring. And of course she's tough, right? Of course your little girl is gonna be tough. You've been through a lot of stuff, Jake. Is there anything that you realize now, going through the last year, going through all you've been through? You've been through more stuff than almost anybody I know, but you keep positive and you keep inspiring people. Any tricks of the trade? Some folks are, it's not getting better for them. It's going to be hard for a while. If you were going to give them, some coaching, some leadership coaching, you used to play football. If you were going to coach a younger version of yourself, what would you tell folks? How do you get through tough times like that?
Yeah, I don't know that there's a recipe. I think there's probably people that have a lot healthier habits for getting through them than maybe I do. But I guess I'm always a nose to the grindstone guy, and I'm a big believer that these cliches ring true, man. It's like tough times don't last, tough people do. It's the Stockdale paradox, and I was giving a talk to one of Team Rubicon's partners the other day, like Farmers Insurance, 25,000 employees. And they said, Jake, can you come in and give a talk that helps people just cope with the grind as they're 11 months into this COVID thing? And I invoked, Admiral Stockdale from Vietnam. And for your listeners who don't know, Stockdale, POW in Vietnam, highest ranking POW of the war. He was in the Hanoi Hilton for 7.5 years. And Jim Collins, the famous business author, once asked him, like, what was the difference between the guys that lasted and the guys that didn't? And he said, the guys that didn't last were the ones who fooled themselves into thinking that they'd be home by Easter or be home by Thanksgiving or be home by Christmas. And then those false horizons would come and pass, and they would just lose hope. And he said, the key to surviving tough times is embracing the brutal reality of what you're facing, but at the same time, never losing hope that you're going to prevail in the end. And so, I guess that's kind of my life philosophy. You're going to get punched in the face. All you can do is just kind of clench your jaw and fight back.
I think that's so important, man. It's so important to hear you clarify that. And, especially now that we sit here in the spring of 2021, because, I've been doing my best to keep grinding and encourage other folks to recognize that there aren't any silver bullets. Yeah. Things are going to be harder things will come, right? And folks thought maybe the election was going to be, everything was going to be better. Then it was inauguration. Then it was the vaccine. There's not a silver bullet that's going to make everything go away, whether it's a stimulus check or, a vaccine. So I think that perspective is important in steeling people for what looks like it's going to be, still a couple of hard years, maybe a hard new normal. Also, some things are coming back to normal in a bad way. As we have this conversation, there's this mass shooting in Boulder. I've said repeatedly, I think veterans like us can be a bridge on this issue. Independents especially, I hope, can be a bridge on maybe one of the most vexing and divisive issues. But what's your takeaway, man? You're a parent, 2 little kids, you see this happen. We're all still concerned about it happening in schools all the time. What's your takeaway as a thought leader in this country who cares deeply about where we're all going?
Yeah, it's so confusing and frustrating. And, I can't stop thinking about Einstein's theory of insanity, right? It's doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result. If we can't first acknowledge that we have an issue in this country, right? We have an issue with with mass shootings. Like, just think about that for a second. We have an endemic mass shooting phenomena that is unique to any country in the world. Like, that's not the type of American exceptionalism that we want to be pursuing. So first of all, we just have to accept, like, that's the reality. This is a problem. If we can't center on that, then we're not going to have much in the way of productive conversations. I'm a believer in the Second Amendment. I own rifles. I don't own any in California, but I keep some back in Iowa. And I enjoy shooting them for sport. But do I personally feel the need to have an AR-15? No. Do I own one? I do. Because I have the right to, because I carried one, in the Marine Corps. And frankly, it's like, if I was a professional baseball player, I'd probably keep a baseball bat. And every once in a while, I'd want to go to the batting cage, even though I'm not trying to make money at it anymore. Mm-hmm. But if you ask me the question, should anybody be able to walk in off the street and buy one? I'd say we should really probably be able to have a thoughtful conversation about that. And, I could fall on either side of that issue, but I think we really need to have that debate. We need to be able to have it sensibly, without anger. And, I think that the underlying issue, which only in the last couple of years has begun to get enough of the attention, there's a gun control conversation that we have to have, a sensible one. But I shouldn't even say the other part of that conversation is mental health. Right. And what are we doing about the mental health crisis in this country, which has been dramatically underfunded, under-researched, under-acknowledged over the last 50, 60, 70 years, which is only getting worse, which things like COVID have contributed to. So, yeah, Paul, like, you and I, we're not going to solve this problem, but I agree with you that we can be a part of maybe a sensible conversation about these issues, because it does bridge into our past in the military. Mm.
Yeah, I think Jake, it's really important to define the goal, right? The pilots often say, start with the target, right? What's the target? Yeah. We have a mass shooting problem. Everybody thinks that's bad. How do we solve it? And then trying to get towards solutions. I'm maybe a little more hopeful that guys and gals like us actually can solve it, because I don't know who else can, right? I think veterans are in a really unique, you were a sniper in the Marine Corps. You know what you're talking about. Having people with subject matter expertise, I think, is really important as we have these difficult conversations. And, bridge builders, maybe we'll talk about this a little bit later. I don't know if you're a Republican or a Democrat. I don't care. If we were in the Marine Corps together, I wouldn't care either. And if you can get things done, I don't care. And maybe that's, something that we need to try to elevate as leaders who are, independent politically and who are trusted across partisan lines and don't have political agendas. But I think you especially and our community are going to be in a really important place to move this forward. Kind of related.
Well, I was just going to say one thing. I think you're right. There's a credibility that comes from the background. And I remember a conversation I had where, somebody wanted to debate whether or not, AR-15 style rifles, also known as assault rifles, like, whether they actually contributed to higher death counts and whether they made mass shooting easier. And this person wanted to argue that they didn't. And I was like, listen, that's a foolish argument. As a sniper, which you just mentioned, I was. Like, we were trained on bolt action rifles, which have, farther ranges in, lethal ranges. But if we were going into an urban environment where we, multiple target engagement, like literally that was the decision criteria, we took an AR-10 platform, right? A heavy caliber AR-15, because for precisely that reason, so that we could kill more people faster. And so, like, that's why these things were designed. So don't give me this bullshit that they aren't any more lethal. They are more lethal. So now let's just move, that shouldn't be debated. Let's just talk about the facts. And the debate should be centered on, should people have access to them? If you're arguing yes, like, what is the rationale? And if you're arguing no, like, let's just come and have that reasonable conversation. But let's not argue about crap that, frankly, there should be no debate about.
Yeah, that experience and the way you describe it is so important. Like, to explain to people practically, tactically, how you would change weapons and why, right? You don't want to reload your sniper rifle. If 5 guys are running at you, you don't have time for that. So you need to change weapons. And I think that is really, really important. The Second Amendment, in my view, doesn't extend to, giving you the right to have an RPG or a bazooka or whatever you want, right? And I think having that perspective from guys and gals in our community is really important. And this is happening another issue I've got to get your thoughts on, Jake. There was an insurrection since last time we spoke to you,
Yeah.
right? As many as 1 in 5 of the folks who were part of that were prior military. There's been a lot of analysis of the Oath Keepers and the military tactics that were used at time. Of course, you and I know that also Officer Goodman, who responded and was heroic, was a veteran. There are plenty of other veterans, but there's a problem here, right? There's a problem, whether it's, one guy or 100 guys. It's a very severe problem. It's a dangerous problem that I think the military hasn't confronted aggressively enough at a policy perspective in the past. And we know that this is out there, right? A guy tried to ambush a National Guard vaccination convoy yesterday in Texas, right? This is a new environment. What are your takeaways? The insurrection happened, whether it's thinking about veterans being a part of it or not, it was maybe the greatest test to our democracy we've seen since we've been adults. What do you think, Jake? What are your takeaways?
I mean, never did I think that in my life I would see our Capitol building stormed, in an election attempt to be disrupted. To the element of the high proportion of veterans that were in that crowd, I think it's a concern. I think we are facing a real crisis here. And I was having a conversation with somebody just yesterday where, I made the point that the veterans who are joining these extremist groups are really only slightly different than the veterans who are joining groups like Team Rubicon, right? What are they in search of? They're in search of purpose. They're in search of an identity that they can be proud of. They're in search of a community, and they find it in these groups. Like it's the same way that ISIS recruited, right? They preyed upon people who were at this vulnerable moment in their life where they were in search of something, and they find it in these radical ideologies. And I'll take it one step further. So, a lot of our generation of veterans, I think, are really beginning to grapple with, was my war worth it? And this is something I explored a lot in the book, right? Like a lot of people, Afghanistan was worth it because they attacked us on 9/11, but was it still worth it in 2012? Like if you were in the Marine, if you were in 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines in 2011, and you were in Helmand Valley and you lost 20 guys, how connected was that still to 9/11? And so, the righteousness of your war, and then, Iraq, I mean, I know you've been outspoken about this, we should no longer debate whether it was driven by faulty intelligence. You can have a reasonable debate about motive, but, a lot of people still clung to some nobility of the war in Iraq based on the progress that we made. Hey, it's a democracy now. Women are being educated, and, and there's all this. Well, then ISIS wipes that out, right? And so now there's just simply, it's hard to rationalize the wars that you fought. So now you come home and you have the opportunity to find the righteous cause to fight for, and it's to save our democracy. Boy, that's a compelling recruiting pitch to somebody who came home and is disenchanted with the war that they got. It's dangerous.
I'm so glad we're at this point, because I think you and I are in a really unique position to talk about this, right? We had hundreds of thousands of members at IAVA, and we both knew guys and gals like that were lost, that were searching for something, they were searching for purpose, and it's happening now, right? Like in the same way, you can't kill every ISIS member in the world. It's not, you got to work at the hearts and minds and try to get them from becoming extremism and de-radicalize them further upstream. And that's what Team Rubicon is doing, even if it's for a couple people, right? Maybe you get to one person that would have gone into a worse life of crime or whatever, and they find this purpose and you get hooked into them. It's a lot like when you and I were playing football. How many guys do we know that if they didn't find football, they would have had a totally different life, right? That was me growing up. And so I think exploring why people become radicalized is not really happening in this country right now. Why we never discussed it about Iraq and Afghanistan, and now we're not discussing it here. Everybody wants to know, why hasn't the FBI caught these guys? But they're not really thinking about what's happening in their mind and understanding where they're coming from. So I've really been trying to encourage options, alternatives, in the same way we needed to give Iraqis jobs, right? So they wouldn't pick up a weapon. We need to give them Team Rubicon, or AmeriCorps, or some other way to be involved, so they don't go to the Oath Keepers. So what can be done, at the policy level, right? And I want to go into what you're doing now with vaccinations, because I encouraged folks a year ago, it was a way to get out of the house. We couldn't get out of the house. You could join Team Rubicon and you get out of the house and be a part of it. Now you've taken that much further, but what needs to happen at the high level before we get to what you're doing right to de-radicalize people that we know, that we served with? what do you think is helpful to tackle what I also think is maybe the greatest national security, domestic security threat we face?
Yeah, well, I mean, you've known me for long enough to know that I'm not a policy wonk, and so I won't be
That's
able to
why I
speak.
asked you though. That's why I asked you though, because you're pragmatic and you're the guy who will give the answers that the policy wonks won't.
Well, I mean, first, like, you mentioned tackling these issues upstream. I think we have to be thoughtful in how we do that and how we attack upstream. What and you also mentioned, the key to intervening upstream in places like Iraq and Afghanistan was to make sure these young men got jobs. Young men don't do anything but bad stuff when they're economically disenfranchised. I'm sorry, like, call me sexist, whatever. Like, we do really dumb stuff when we don't have economic opportunity. And I would argue that's probably almost a uniquely male thing, at least in the parts of the world that I've been to and seen. And so, the income inequality, economic inequality that we're seeing in this country it's a massive threat to the future of this country. And I think it's in part what is leading to a lot of this. I think, a lot of these extremist groups are feeding off of this economic disenfranchisement that people have experienced. They for the first time are not getting the American dream that they were promised. And it's, in some ways it's a bit kind of coming full circle, because typically the economically disenfranchised have been minority groups, and they are still economically disenfranchised, statistically speaking. But now that's coming back, and it's hitting white working class, Rust Belt America in a way that is really causing a lot of this disruption and creating these opportunities for extremism. I don't know what we do about speech online. This all of this talk about how do we regulate, internet companies and hold them accountable for hate speech. Frankly, I don't know what the solution is. I don't know what's right by the Constitution, but I know that we have got to figure it out. I'm not much of a believer in kind of a literal interpretation of a document that was written, 2 centuries ago. I think it's a brilliant document that has clear flaws. No more evidenced by the dozens of amendments that have been made in the centuries since, right? And so I'm not someone who buys into this idea that our country can't evolve as the nature of the human race evolves. And so we have to be thoughtful about that. But at the end of the day, we're governed by a constitution. So we have to work within it, or we have to change it to adapt to times that are adapting. But again, we need people a lot smarter than me, brother, to figure that out.
Yeah, well, I also think this is not there are no perfect solutions, right, about that. But there's an insight in this conversation we're having that I hope folks think about. What we do need is more of you, and more of Team Rubicon, and more alternatives, and for that to be a even more appealing, even more present, even more available option for people, so they take the good road instead of the bad road. So I'm going to always be an advocate for not just donations and corporate funding, but government support for programs like yours and the ones that I ran and worked with, because I saw them work, right? And I think, the FBI is still trying to track these guys and gals down right now, right? There's still some of them that are out there, but the country's not thinking enough about how to get them not to convert. And I think Team Rubicon is maybe one of the best things I can think of, right? I mean, and you and I think especially as white men, have to talk as loudly and as consistently as possible about these issues to appeal to other white men who might only listen to us, right? In this time where it is more complicated than that. But I really think it's an important issue for us who come from vulnerable places that could have been, in a different world. Maybe I could have been radicalized. Maybe you could have been radicalized. But we didn't go that way. So I really think amplification of the work that you're doing is critical. And let's talk about maybe the best example from the last year, which is you launched the Veterans Coalition for Vaccination. This is like, the Marshall Plan for veterans. I love this. I was encouraging it and I'm supporting it in any way that I can. But this is kind of like maybe Team Rubicon's greatest moment yet. You guys keep coming with great moments and rising to the demand of what this country requires. But this is like, it looks like all that stuff coming together, and you truly leading this and your organization leading it. And now, last time I checked, you were over 617,000 people vaccinated, right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's interesting because we did a ton of work in COVID last year. Not anything that we ever expected to have to do as an organization, but late in the year, we knew that there were going to be several viable vaccines. We also knew that there was really no plan, and that's in part, that lays at the administration's feet, but it's also it has to lay at the feet of, this is just a disaster of such epic proportion. Vaccinating people isn't necessarily a federal government challenge; it's a county government challenge, and there's over 3,000 counties in the country. So we felt like we had the opportunity, with our decade of experience in operational planning and execution within those 3,000 counties, to help. And so we began building out a playbook for vaccine support. And then we realized, well, even with 150,000 of our own volunteers, we won't even be able to like scratch the surface of human capital requirements that are necessary. So we went out, found a bunch of great organizations like IAVA and others, and pulled together this Veterans Coalition for Vaccination to bring them together to support these sites across the country. And right now we're supporting about 50 sites. We've done, well north of 500,000 vaccine support work. And we want to scale to 500 sites supported across the country. We're fundraising against that. But there's another element of this too, which I think plays to the conversation we've been having, which was, the Pew Research, every year they talk about who the most trusted demographics in the country are. And every year, veterans in the military rank number one as having the highest degree of public trust and confidence in the US. They rank higher than scientists, which is unfortunate and should probably flip-flop here moving forward, but certainly higher than politicians and elected leaders, corporate executives, even higher than teachers and some others that you might think would rank up there. And so we thought, okay, when 40% of America is indicating that they're not going to take the vaccine for a variety of reasons, some grounded in reality, others not, how do we leverage that trust and efficacy that veterans have to try to convince Americans to do their part? And so, we went to, the old World War II style posters, Rosie the Riveter and the Victory Gardens, and, hey, go fight in Europe, and recreated those for the modern age with a really diverse cast of people representing them, and really are trying to convince America that, listen, this isn't about you. This isn't about you. Yes, you have individual choice and liberty, and nobody's going to force you to get a vaccine, but reframe how you're thinking about it. It's not about you. It's about your country. It's about your neighbors. And like, Jesus, man, I think about like, if after Pearl Harbor, the majority of young American men said, "Oh, I'm not going to go to war. I might die," where the fuck would we be?
right.
They didn't volunteer to go fight the Japanese or the Nazis because it was in their best interest. It was adverse to their freaking interest, but they did it anyway. And like, how are we making this about my body, my choice? Like, yeah, of course it is. Of course it's your body, it's your choice. Make the right choice. And it just frustrates the hell out of me, man. Just frustrates the hell out of me.
But you break it down so well. Like that clip is going to be really important, and the ads are awesome. I love the ads. I think they're these amazing, iconic ads you've put together. But I think the framing is really important too. I mean, I said it early on. You wear a mask. Don't kill Norman Lear, right? Who we had on, who was 98 years old, or don't risk your daughter, right? Or anyone else who is vulnerable here. And I think that's starting to break through. But it is that grassroots conversation that a guy's having with his buddy, or people. I'm having it with my family right now. I mean, there are people in my family that have been really resistant. They're driving me crazy, and it's gonna fuck up Easter. Like, come on, what are we doing, guys? Like, let's figure this out, right? But I think you are in the lead role. And look, $17 billion is going to the VA in this new COVID relief. $1 trillion or whatever it is going across the country. Am I right that you all aren't getting any of that?
We're not getting any of that, no. And
is that by choice, or is that by like, are they not giving it to you, or would you not take it? Or like, I look at the scale, right? The VA this week is going to open eligibility to anybody with a DD-214 and their spouse. So that could be literally tens of millions of people quickly, right? I don't know if there's any way to get more people vaccinated quickly than flipping that switch, but why aren't they giving it to you guys and saying, hey, put this on steroids so you don't have to go hat in hand to all these companies?
Yeah, well, we are launching a partnership with the VA to support their operations, and in particular the rural delivery, which is where a lot of veteran populations live.
Great.
And we're in our hats off to the VA. They are doing everything that they can to cut through the red tape and the bureaucracy that they're known for. And so we're probably activating with them under what's called the fourth mission, which is just a really good outside the box way of approaching it. So, but no, we're not getting any of that money. And this is not, it's not because we don't want it. It's just simply how money moves. And
but it's also, Jake, you're a creative leader. You're one of the most creative leaders I've seen operate for the last couple of decades, right? There's a lack of creativity here, right? Like there's a lack of creativity in government, whether it's the CDC or the VA. And I give McDonough credit. I think he's off to a good start. I think he's doing, the first year could be do all the shit that Wilkie should have done for the last year, right? That's probably true of Biden too. But I think you all are in a really unique position to you're a sniper, put steel on target, right? Like make things happen in a way that's not just creative, but effective. So I hope that this crisis can be an opportunity for that new kind of partnership and that new kind of innovation. It's not happening in politics, right? Politics seems to be more solidified. We've been talking a lot on this show about how more and more people are independent. Last time I asked you if you would run for something, you said no. You're still in California. Maybe you could run for governor, or maybe you could go back to Iowa, or maybe you can go to Wisconsin. Wes Moore wouldn't commit on this show a couple weeks ago, but what about you, man? Can we draft you to run for anything?
Probably not. Listen, we have something really special here at Team Rubicon. As you said, like the impact that we're having right now across the country, I couldn't have that impact as a representative of a small district somewhere. Simply put, I just couldn't. I have more influence and more impact in my current role. And, when the time comes for me to move on from Team Rubicon, whenever that might be, like I will look for an opportunity to have similar or larger impact somewhere else. And if it's elected office at that time, maybe, but I don't think it will be, frankly. And I don't know, people would love to say, well, Jake, go be a change agent in Washington, DC. I mean, come on, you guys watch the same, you guys see the same thing happening in DC that I do. I just don't know that's where my effort is best applied.
I am going to continue to push you on that because I think you'd make a hell of a senator. You'd make a hell of a governor. I said it out loud. I said Biden should have considered you for FEMA director. Next time they talk about a VA secretary, why not you? I mean, you're more qualified than McDonough, quite frankly. I mean, there are plenty of people that we can talk about. It's true. I think it's true. And he may do a great job. But in the years to come, I hope they think creatively about problems, but I also hope they think creatively about leaders, whether it's elected or appointed. A guy like you, I don't want to hear you're too young or you don't have government or whatever the excuses are going to be. You're a guy whose name should be on the roster for consideration for all these hard jobs that are an extension of service. And too often people can't get shit done in them, right? Like I take a whole bunch of Team Rubicon people, put them in the VA. That'd be a good group of get shit done people, right?
Yeah.
So I know that you're not going to say yes, but I'm always going to push you on it and encourage you on it. The book is out, Once a Warrior. Everybody should check it out. Everybody should support Team Rubicon. One thing you did last time was issue a call to action. So I want to throw that one to you, Jake. What's the call to action? What should folks do if they want to help or be involved?
Well, I would say this, the fastest path back to normalcy for this country is through vaccinations. And, we need to get more Americans vaccinated and we need to do it faster. And so if you're that person that's on the fence, I'd ask you to do the research. Certainly it is your body. It is a new vaccine. It is an emergency authorization, but I am confident that this vaccine is safe. I gain that confidence by doing diligent research, by speaking with the experts within Team Rubicon, our chief medical officer, epidemiologists, like find credible sources of information, do your own research, come to your own conclusion, then go get vaccinated, encourage everybody in your circle to do the same. It's the only way we're going to get through this together. Americans, we're always at our best when the times are at their worst. Like this can be no different. This is not the time to be fractured along these partisan lines. Now's the time to cross them and we can debate something partisan on the backside of COVID, but let's fucking fight through this ambush now.
I love it. I got to ask you, did you think that JJ Watt might go to the Packers?
I did. I thought there was a good chance, but it wasn't in the cards, I guess.
Man,
there you go. The big pun.
What's that?
I said big pun. It wasn't in the cards.
Yeah, yeah, right. That was not on anybody's. I didn't think he was going to the Cards. I thought,
Yeah, that was random.
I thought, shit, he might go to the Bucks or he might go play with his brothers in Pittsburgh. And I was really
Yeah.
hoping he'd go to Wisconsin, and maybe
Yeah.
he still will, right? But last final question, I'm going to give you some gifts. Pancakes or waffles? This is a returning champion question. You didn't get this the first time. I'm not asking you the whiskey question, but you can only choose one. This is a place where, we are normally independent and we are bipartisan, but you got to pick one. Pancakes or
Pancakes,
waffles?
man.
So, say again?
Pancakes.
Why?
They're easy. They're easier to make, so I make them like every weekend for my family. So,
any special stuff go in the Jake Wood pancakes?
I'm on these keto like paleo pancakes or something. My wife bought this mix for, and they're great.
The Kodiak ones, are they Kodiak?
Birch Benders or something.
Kodiak is my favorite. They're not a sponsor of this show. I would love for them to be. Kodiak has been single-handedly keeping me alive in the pandemic with their pancake in a cup. It's like 45 seconds, like a macaroni and cheese.
Oh, it's great.
15 grams of protein. There's a plug, a free plug for them. Okay, but I'm also going to send you virtually some gifts. We got some new Independent Americans gear coming. We got hats. We got camping mugs, which you'll probably like. We didn't have it last time, I don't think, but we're getting you some Uncle Nearest whiskey.
Oh, I like that.
Great American Whiskey continues to win some awards. I know you like whiskey. We've had a whiskey or two together. And Easter's coming back. We're going to send you peeps. I know you picked
nice.
That time.
Nice.
Your way. But Jake Wood, you are one of the most inspiring dudes I know. You continue to serve and sacrifice to this country. I'm honored to know you. I'm so proud of you. We have so many friends in common, but every day, I think if folks want to wake up and see what right looks like, they can look to you and your team. And I just want to thank you for all that you do, and your family for all they do, especially when, frankly, you're dealing with a lot of other shit too, and you're still helping others. You're a real inspiration in what this country is all about, my friend. So I thank you for that.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, man. Anytime.
You got it, man. Stay frosty and stay vigilant.